My first joy is my people, my kin. As long as they live, I still breathe within. I give them the honey my verses distill, for this radiant joy outweighs gold by will. My second joy is my native speech. With words I have healed the deepest breach. I do so because I am my people's son. They taught me the truth and the good to be done. My third joy is my motherland's might. While others may stand for their gain or their right, I stand for my homeland, for all that is mine. My friend, take this fire, let its spirit still shine.
In 1948, the newspaper Советская граница, the Soviet border, published the first poems of a young poet, Mukagali Makataev. His striking verses immediately stood out in post-war poetry. The intensity that filled those lines touched every reader.
Мукагали мгновенно стал любим.
Mukagali Makataev quickly captured the hearts of his people. Young readers devoured his verses with admiration. Yet, his rise did not sit well with the powers. Officials preferred verses that praised the system, its leaders, and its triumphs. But Mukagali wrote about people. His poetry did not fit within the ideology, and so his work was rarely published. He received the State Prize only after his death, in the year of 2000. Still, the people he wrote for never stopped keeping his poetry close to heart.
Dear Dimashagai, I have renounced everything, my friends, my companions, my vices. I stay at home now and I write. This February, the Secretariat of the Writers' Union of Kazakhstan expelled me from the Union of Soviet Writers. Perhaps they were right. There must have been reasons. I bear no resentment and place no blame. There was a time when I worked for the Writers' Union in the editorial office of Juldes magazine. Yet even then, I always felt like a fifth wheel. The cautious indifference of my colleagues made it painfully clear. That wedge which shattered my reputation will stay in my heart forever. Dear Dimashaga, I am 42 years old now. I have realized that I sought oblivion in the very place where it never existed. I believe I can make amends. I'm asking for your help.
Это письмо на имя первого секретаря ЦК Компартии Казахстана Динмухамеда.
Mukagali Makataev penned this letter to Dinmuhamed Kunaev, the first secretary of the Communist Party of Kazakhstan, in one of the darkest chapters of his life. For reasons lost to history, the letter never reached its addressee, but it endured. And today it bears quiet witness to how heavy his journey was, and how layered and conflicted the life of this remarkable poet had been. Mukagali created his poems in an age when poets were asked to echo the party's chorus, not the voice of their own hearts. He could not shape himself to that demand. His poetry rose instead from honesty and ache. His verses outlasted every prohibition and took root in the hearts of his people. Now, when we read this letter, we see more than a relic of its time. We see a testament to the fragility of genius, a reminder that behind great poetry often stands a soul, still seeking to be understood.
Макатаев – это настоящая жемчужина казахской поэзии. В его поэзии много...
Makataev is one of the finest voices in Kazakh poetry. His work carries a rare honesty and a quiet generosity of spirit. Through his verse, the Kazakh language rises from everyday speech to the level of art. Some poets make you struggle for meaning, but Makataev's poetry feels effortless. This is Kazakh poetry at its purest, spoken by a man who gave his heart to his people.
Уникальность поэзии Мукагали Макатаева заключается в том, что
What makes Mukagali Makataev's poetry truly unique is the breath of freedom that runs through it. For readers, his voice arrived like fresh air after long silence. People discovered sincerity in his poetry. His verse taught people that they could speak from the heart and still be understood.
He once described himself as a poet with the heart of a child, and perhaps that is what made Mukagali Makataev extraordinary. He managed to keep alive a quality that so often fades with age: the pure delight in simple things, the instinct to see beauty where others pass it by.
The stillness of the earth is like a child asleep, his dream unbroken, tender, deep. When he awakens, do not break his peace. Let slumber hold him still, let calmness never cease. Sleep, my son, and dream once more. The world's vast riches, they are yours. My joy, my plenty, all I own, belong to you, my heart, my home.
в центре любой его поэзии человек.
Mukagali Makataev's poetry is rooted in the human soul. He wrote about the inner life of a person. Through his verses, readers began to see the person behind the poet. His poems speak in a simple and direct way. They stay with people because every line feels sincere. He wrote with freedom and clarity, never shaped by convention or expectation. That integrity keeps his voice alive.
Mukagali Makataev was born on the 9th of February 1931 in the village of Karasaz, in the Narınkol district of the Almaty region, at the foot of the Hantengri Mountains. He often returned to these landscapes in his poetry, saying that the beauty of his homeland awakened his desire to create. He was the first child of Süleyman Makataev and his wife Nagiman. As the eldest son, he carried his family's hopes. His parents were humble, hard-working people who raised their children to value honesty, fairness, and the dignity of work.
Именно с Карасаза начинается его любовь к природе. Горы, солнце.
His love for nature began in Karasaz. The mountains, the sun, the rivers, all of them found their place in Mukagali Makataev's poetry. What makes his work unique is how central the human soul is to it. He wrote about people of every age: children, adults, the elderly, women. Many of his poems were dedicated to his family, including his grandmother, Tiyin, his mother, his wife, and his children. Mukagali Makataev's early years were filled with joy. That time ended when the war began. His father was drafted, and Mukagali, still a child, took on the duties of an adult. He looked after his family and carried that responsibility all his life. His father never returned. The family received the official notice that he had died.
Отец не вернулся с фронта, и за эти военные годы Мукагали повзрослел. Он был хозяином.
His father never returned from the war. Mukagali took on the duties of an adult while still a child. He became the one his family relied on, and that sense of duty never left him. The memory of those years stayed with him. Later, he often thought about what childhood truly meant. Even after hardship and success, he kept something of that child within him, and he found strength in the mountains, the river, and the grasslands of his home. The war took too much from Mukagali Makataev and from thousands of children of his generation. It took their fathers and brothers, their peace and their joy. It stole their childhood. Those children carried a burden far beyond their years. They worked beside adults, sewing uniforms, making boots, doing everything they could. Boys and girls spent their years plowing the land, gathering crops, and tending livestock after school.
Отец всегда перечислял себя к детям войны. Он говорил нам, своим детям.
My father often called himself a child of the war. He used to tell us, his own children, that they never really had a childhood. Those years, he would say, had fallen on the hardest time, the war. They had grown up behind the plow, working hard for the collective farm, and that heavy physical labor, he believed, had taken their childhood away.
Всегда способствовало нам, и поэтому детства у нас не было.
That wartime experience, that sense of a stolen childhood, runs through much of his poetry. When you read about his early years, you can feel how deeply those memories stayed with him. He often said his childhood had been hard, almost non-existent, and that he and his generation were forced to grow up too soon.
Потом, говорит, мы взрослели очень рано, стали на самостоятельный взрослый путь.
We are orphans, alone in the world, neither children nor fully grown. We do not tremble, we do not cry. The earth spins beneath us, passing by. Do not condemn us rough and refined, willing for labor of every kind. We're the weary, the lost, the torn, the hungry in spirit, by hunger worn.
У него, допустим, есть стихотворение, которое называется «Кара амбар». В этом стихотворении маленькие...
He once wrote a poem titled Kara Ambar, the Black Granary. It tells of children returning home from school, walking past a great old barn where little grain was kept. An aging watchman waited for them there. When the children came near, he would pour a small handful of wheat into each of their palms so they could take it home to their mothers, who would grind it, boil it, and make a meal for their family. And yet, neither war nor hardship silenced his love for books. In the few quiet moments he had, Mukagali turned to them. Through Abai, Pushkin, and Shakespeare, he discovered another world, untouched by hunger or cold. Among the lines of great poets and writers, he found comfort and a faith that life would go on.
Какой бы тему ни касался, там, тема жизни и смерти, философский.
Whatever theme Mukagali Makataev touched, life and death, philosophy, or the poet's moral duty, he never echoed anyone else. His uniqueness lay in the voice he found for himself, a voice unlike any other. Before him, the Kazakh land had great Zhirao and, of course, Abai and many poets of stature. But Mukagali stood apart. He did not imitate Abai's style or tone. He discovered his own notes, his own ideas, his own way of speaking. And in that lies his true originality. In the village of Shibut, where the young Mukagali Makataev taught Russian, he met Lashin, a gentle, warm-hearted teacher of Kazakh language and literature. They formed a bond that was quiet but deeply felt. That connection soon grew into love. Lashin became not only his wife, but also his confidant and his calm in difficult times. She raised their 6 children and stood by him through years of struggle. He wrote tirelessly. In 1951, his first collection, Jastar Jere, Songs of Youth, was published. A decade later, in 1962, the newspaper Socialist Kazakhstan printed his long poem, Appassionata. The work marked a turning point, placing Mukagali Makataev among the top Kazakh poets.
Отец начал писать очень в юном возрасте. А в 60-х годах
My father began writing at a very young age. During the time of the thaw across the Soviet Union, there was a great surge of creativity. Poets were finding their voices in every republic, including Kazakhstan. The years of Stalin's terror and the persecution of writers were already behind. In that sense, my father was fortunate. By the early 60s, he had already matured as an artist. Those were the years when he created his most distinctive works.
вполне таким состоявшейся творческой личностью. И он творил.
Мне вспоминается рассказ выдающегося литературоведа, академика.
I remember a story told by the well-known literary scholar, academician Rimgali Nurgaliyev. He once spoke about the mid-1960s, a remarkable period when a new wave of Kazakh writers, poets and critics burst into the literary scene with extraordinary energy. They often gathered in the offices of Zhuldis, at that time the only literary magazine in the country. Those meetings were full of debate and laughter. They held lively literary quizzes, testing each other's knowledge and wit. And who do you think won most often? Not Bekbayeva, the future master of prose, not Askar Suleimanov, the brilliant intellectual, not even Nurgaliyev himself. It was the young poet Mukagali Makataev, newly arrived from the rural Narynkol district of the Almaty region.
Села в Нарынкольском районе Алматинской области.
У Макатаева много стихотворений, более 1000 стихотворений он написал, более 10 поэм написал.
Mukagali Makataev wrote more than 1,000 poems and over 10 long poems, each remarkable in its own way. But what makes him truly special is that his poetry never stops revealing itself. I have studied his work for more than 20 years, and even now, in different moments of life, I find something new. At times, I return to his translation of the Divine Comedy. In other moments, I am drawn to his poem, Yesimemina Algaysin, Remember Me. And when I travel across the Kazakh steppe, I always think of Sarajailau. Family played a profound role in Mukagali Makataev's work. He loved his 6 children with all his heart. They were his source of joy, light, and inspiration. Their laughter, their tenderness, and their happy voices filled his world with warmth. Surrounded by his family, he rediscovered the quiet happiness of life, and that feeling found its way into his poetry. The family never owned a home. They moved from one rented flat to another, living modestly. Yet, even within those humble walls, there was always a sense of warmth and care. That spirit of home flowed naturally into his verses, giving them vividness, sincerity, and deep humanity. But the happiness of that home did not last. His eldest daughter, Maygul, his pride and joy, was struck by a motorcyclist. The tragedy was a heavy blow, one from which the poet never fully recovered. Grief and despair stayed with him, shadowing the years that followed.
Who would dare to stand against death's call? Lie still, my dear, I will come after all. While I wander beneath the eternal sky, your star still shines and will never die.
Помню, приходил виновник этого происшествия со своей семьей и четырьмя детьми.
I remember the man who caused the accident, the motorcyclist, coming to our house with his wife and 4 children. The man asked my father for forgiveness, and my father, with his generous and gentle heart, forgave him. That moment stayed with me for the rest of my life.
In 1971, Mukagali Makataev lost his job, and with it began another chapter of hardship. From then on, life for his family became a daily struggle to survive. His journals from those years reveal the pain and despair he felt.
December the 7th, 1973. The coming year will mark a year since I was left without work. Cursed is my poetic fate, and cursed beyond measure is the world around me. The world I gave my soul and heart to, believing it would answer with kindness. I spend my days in quiet humiliation, days that yield nothing but bitterness and pain. Now I know that there is no one on earth more miserable than I am.
Эти слова звучат как крик души, и в них нет ни капли.
These words sound like a cry from the depth of the soul, and there is not a trace of exaggeration in them. In those years, he was almost an outcast in the literary world. Many of his peers refused to acknowledge his gift. His poetry was dismissed as dark, unnecessary, even decadent. At writers' meetings, his works were met with harsh, sometimes humiliating criticism. Each new reproach weighed heavily upon him.
Когда Макатаев стал ощущать очень большое давление на себя, когда его пытались не публиковать.
When Mukagali Makataev began to feel the growing pressure around him, when his work was being withheld from publication and he was publicly shamed, he poured that pain into his poetry. When jealousy and resentment tried to push him aside, when others sought to tarnish his name, he turned to his notebooks, confiding his most private thoughts there. He would ask himself, "What have I done wrong? Why are people so cruel to me?" For Makataev, poetry itself became a diary of his life. The ordinary people loved and admired him a lot. Yet within the literary circle, there were those who, for reasons of envy or rivalry, harbored resentment. He once wrote, "I have no friends, no enemies, but when you read his poems, you can feel the presence of those who wished him ill. It often happens that true talent unsettles others." A poet of his depth inevitably stirred discomfort, jealousy, and perhaps even the fear of being outshone. Mukagali Makataev was once nominated for the state prize, but he never received it, not only because of literary politics, but because he could not fit within the limits of socialist realism. His poetry carried the sound of freedom. He wrote about life. In his early years, he still followed the official themes of the time, writing poems about Lenin and other heroic symbols of the Soviet ideal. But soon he turned away from such subjects, realizing that real poetry must come from the heart, not from ideology. Poets rarely live easily within the reach of censorship. Their nature leans towards freedom, and they often pay dearly for it. Makataev was one of them, a man of spirit and conviction, a Kazakh Yesenin, as he once called himself, who chose to write from conscience rather than command.
Hey, Sergei, 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 Sergei. I follow your fate with my own life's way. I drift away beyond the edge of day. Like you, I never heeded what kind hearts would say.
There's also a clear echo of Sergei Yesenin's poetry in his work. You can feel it in that same farewell tone, like in Yesenin's famous lines, "Goodbye, my friend, goodbye." Those verses, believed to have been written before his death at the Angleterre Hotel, carry a sense of departure, of leaving too soon when so much still remained unfinished. That same feeling runs through Makataev's poetry as well, that sense of an artist aware of his own fragile fate and of how brief even a bright life can be. He took the intrigues within the writers' union deeply to heart. He watched as the truly gifted were pushed aside and discredited, while mediocrity and flattery were rewarded with praise and honor. Such injustice shook him to the core. At one Congress, unable to stay silent, he stood and spoke openly. Not in some quiet corner, but before the visiting officials from Moscow. His words were too direct, too honest. They escorted him from the hall. From that day on, the doors of the literary establishment closed to him.
Дело в том, что идеология
The thing about ideology is that it's a complex mechanism, one that demands obedience. But Makataev was not someone who could live by obedience. He was a man of freedom, warm-hearted, generous, and deeply human. He belonged completely to his homeland. So when he was told what to write, when he was urged to produce poems that praised political events or served official ideals, his whole being resisted.
Hey, you pretenders! Who are you to judge me now? The true judges are still to come. Their time will place us all somehow. The years will pass, a new generation will rise, and each of us will stand where we belong. It has always been this way, and so it will remain. As for me, I belong to the century ahead, a voice born for the 21st dawn.
Я имел счастье с ним немножко пообщаться, хотя был годы.
I was lucky enough to meet him. It was during the height of his fame, and I was still a second-year university student. Back then, I had written a review of his book, Diaries. I carried that newspaper with me, hoping I might run into him. For a long time, it never happened. And then I finally saw him, standing in the lobby of the Writers' Union, reading my article. When he finished, he embraced me, and then he said we should celebrate the occasion, and so we did.
Despite the pain and the disappointments, a remarkable purity remained within him. His family remembered that he often called himself a man with the soul of a child. That childlike openness was at the very heart of who he was. And that is how those who loved him remember him.
Я думаю, он говорил, что ничего не утаивая от своего народа, он с чистым.
I think he used to say that he never hid anything from his people. With a heart as open and trusting as a child's, he poured himself into his poems, without fear or disguise. He believed that one day his readers would look beyond the words. They would want to know the man himself, who he was, how he lived, what he dreamed of, and it was that belief that kept him going.
Какой он был человек, как он жил, о чем мечтал. И вот эта вера его поддерживала.
У него вот это очень трогательные стихи, это которые были написаны в конце жизни.
Some of the most moving poems were written near the end of his life. One of them was Fariza. It is an extraordinary piece, filled with raw emotion. No one could express pain the way Mukagali did. He wrote, "Among Kazakh men, I could find no friend, and so I turned to you, though you are a woman, to share my sorrow." There is such deep tragedy in those lines that you can't help but feel tears rise when you read them. Mukagali was so misunderstood, so underappreciated in his own time.
Indeed, the poet Fariza Ungarsinova was one of the few people with whom Mukagali Makataev shared a true spiritual bond. They met only a few times, yet poetry bound them together. In the end, that connection found its echo in song.
Fariza, Fariza can, Fariza kız, ömrede.
Это песня, которая для нас очень важна, и это очень приятно, и это мы гордимся тем, что.
This song holds a special place in our hearts. It moves us deeply, and we take pride in knowing that such an extraordinary man chose to dedicate his poetry to our mother when she was still so young, standing at the very beginning of her creative path. For her, it was more than a gesture. It became a quiet source of confidence and strength at a time when women's voices were rarely heard beside men's. That recognition gave her courage. Through his verses, Mukagali reached not only to our mother, but to every woman, to all who carried the same grace, compassion, and quiet resilience that she embodied.
Девушкам, женщинам, которых олицетворяла наша мама.
January the 31st, 1975. I try to remember a single day that left a trace of joy in my mind, but none will come. 44 years have passed since I first opened my eyes to this world, and life has grown so bitter, so humiliating, that at times I feel the urge to walk away from it entirely, to surrender by my own choice. There was a time when I did not even know the meaning of illness, but fate, it seems, decided I should learn it. Now I know what it means, and I've come to know it all too well.
In 1975, Mukagali Makataev fell seriously ill. Years of emotional turmoil, pressure, and material hardship had slowly eroded his health. He was admitted to hospital. Even there, confined to a ward, he refused to be still. Rather than focusing on recovery, he immersed himself completely in his work, as if some instinct told him that his time was drawing to an end. Each day he wrote for hours, and in just 2 months, he produced nearly 4,000 lines of verse, not in search of fame nor recognition, but in service of poetry itself. To him, it felt like a reunion after a long separation. At that time, Mukagali devoted himself not only to his own poetry, but also to translation. Through his work, Kazakh readers were able to discover the Divine Comedy by Dante, the sonnets of Shakespeare, and the verse of Pushkin, Nekrasov, and Blok. His translations became a treasure of Kazakh literature and opened new horizons for readers.
И вот это душевное путешествие Данте
Dante's journey through the depths of the human soul left a strong impression on Mukagali Makataev. In his own poetry, he often returned to the idea of inner trial, of descending into darkness for the sake of spiritual clarity. Some readers see in these lines a willingness to face suffering, as if by carrying the burden of human suffering, he could help the world. It's rare to find such a vision in any poet.
They say every poet is in some way a prophet. Mukagali Makataev seemed to see both the path of his people and his own. At 40, he wrote Just Another 20 Years, a quiet plea for more time, to write, to live, to bring what was still within him. Soon after, he composed Requiem, often compared to Mozart's Final Symphony, not for its grandeur, but for its honesty and depth. Only after his death did the Requiem find its full voice, a farewell that became the highest expression of his art.
A man in black came through the door and said, "A Requiem, Mozart, I implore." He touched the keys, the echoes cried, and grief through trembling strings replied. The sound hung heavy, sharp and deep. It pressed the soul, it made hearts weep. As life and death their voices twined, we ask a Requiem, Mozart, this time.
Моцарт – великий композитор, всемирно известный.
Mozart was one of the world's great composers. According to legend, a man once came to him and asked for a requiem. With Makataev, it was much the same. A stranger came and asked for a requiem. As we know, a requiem is a funeral mass, and what Makataev created was his own version of it, a poetic reflection that echoed the spirit of Mozart's music. Makataev seemed to sense that the end was drawing near. When friends brought him a copy of Umir Dastan to sign, he would often write the date, the 27th of March. At the time, no one gave it any meaning. Only later did they realize that it was the date of his death. The day before he passed away, his wife and son came to visit. Seeing how frail he had become, Lashin sighed, and that sigh would be reflected in his final poem. The next morning, they found his notebook with the poem, Kursunbeshe, do not sigh. I think in that poem he was trying to comfort his wife, to tell her not to sigh, not to grieve so deeply after he was gone. Among Kazakhs, there has always been a special way of understanding death. Kazakhs believe that a person who leaves this world does not disappear forever. The very word for passing, qaytis boldu, means to return. So perhaps even then he wanted to reassure her, to remind her that he would not be lost completely, that part of him would remain with them.
И когда были похороны в Алмате, начался такой нудный.
I remember the day of his funeral in Almaty city. A slow, endless rain began to fall, as if Mother Nature herself was mourning her son that day. It didn't stop, even after he was laid to rest. The rain kept falling, quietly, as though the earth refused to let him go.
Все равно дождик шел. Вот так я могу сказать.
Fame and recognition proved fleeting and came far too late. The people loved his poetry, yet censorship and envy kept his voice from being heard. It is almost symbolic that on the day of his passing, a new collection of poems appeared in the bookstores of Almaty. Only decades later, in the year of 2000, Mukagali Makataev was posthumously awarded the State Prize of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Today, his name stands beside those of the great Kazakh classics, such as Abay, Shakarim, Mukhtar Awezov. His poetry has become not just a national treasure, but an immortal part of the nation.
Бүгінге дейін Мұқағали әлем әдебиеттерінің маңдайындағы үлкен жұлдыздарының.
Today, Mukagali Makataev is recognized as one of the brightest stars in world literature. His poems have been translated into English, Chinese, Russian, Uzbek, Turkish, and many other languages. Readers across the globe know his name. His voice has reached far beyond Kazakhstan.
Әлем қазір оқып жатыр. Тек қана Қазақстанның жаңағы оқырмандары емес, әлемнің оқырмандары, Мұқағалидың кештері, Мұқағалиға...
Every year on his birthday, schools throughout the country hold evenings of poetry and remembrance, not by decree, but from the heart. It shows how deeply he is loved and how his words continued to live among the people. Mukagali carried forward the spirit of Abay, extending that same vision of truth and beauty into a new age. He once said, "I will continue the path Abay began."
Мен Абай салған жолды арғартай жалғастырам деген ғана сөзі бар.
Every life teaches something to those who come after. Though Mukagali Makataev did not live to see 50, his voice, carried through his poetry, became part of his people and will stay with them forever. The songs we hear today, the ones that linger in our minds and carry us through time, owe more than we realize to Mukagali Makataev. It was he who gave them their depth and power. He poured his love and pain into them, turning what he lived and felt into poetry. His language lifted Kazakh poetry to a new horizon. And though his own life unfolded in the shadows of envy and deceit, it was Makataev who left behind what others only sought, a legacy that endures, shaped in the lines of his poetry.
When thunder stirs and rain runs free, and light returns across the lea, when all renews as seasons flee, may you all remember me.
Я хотел бы, чтобы мы следовали этому.
I would like us to honor the wish of our remarkable poet, Let's keep the memory of Makataev alive. Let us not allow remembrance to fade. Let us remember him, cherish him, and keep reading the works of the great Kazakh poet Mukagali Makataev.
Его стихи до сих пор трогают души романтиков, а его
His poetry continues to touch the hearts of dreamers, and his image has become the very embodiment of love. Kazakhs speak of Mukagali Makataev with pride and reverence, for what he wrote was never just poetry, it was life itself. Mukagali was more than a poet. He was a voice that could capture the most delicate shades of feeling and turn them into words.